Great to be back with you again. It is the Mack Brown Show. My name is Jones Angel. He, of course, is the Hall of Fame head coach of Carolina football, Mack Brown. We'll be here for the next hour talking Tar Heel football. Appreciate you being with us so much this evening. You're going to not only hear from Coach Brown, but also hear from Tar Heel defensive lineman Ray Vohasek during the show today, so look forward to that. That was a fun conversation we had with Ray a couple days ago. But let's get down to business. And, Coach, it has been a long time for Carolina football since the Tar Heels defeated Syracuse. And, of course, they were preparing to host Charlotte in Kenan Stadium, only to have that game canceled just about 48 hours prior to kick due to COVID problems with the Charlotte team. Take us through how you broke that news to your team and then how you've moved forward since then.
Well, Jones, this has been the longest layoff for Carolina football in 68 years.
Wow.
In 1952, we had a polio outbreak and took a little bit longer then, but this has been the longest time. So it's just been so crazy and so unique. So I'm out on the practice field on Thursday before the Charlotte game, and I always take my phone with me because I do my notes now. Instead of writing them on a tab, I put them in my phone. And that really helps me to get things to someone, to get the notes for the staff meeting a lot quicker. And all of a sudden I look down and see Will Healy's calling me from Charlotte, and that just is so unusual for somebody to call you at 9 o'clock on a Thursday during practice that you're playing. So I didn't pay attention to it, and Will texted and said, "You need to call me now." And then Rick Steinbacher came out to me and he said, "Coach, Charlotte's got some issues with positives in contact tracing, and they're not going to play." We were having a great practice, and we're halfway through, so I just decided to let the guys practice. We got through. I brought them all up. I never want to say something horrible has happened because they may think we've lost somebody or somebody died, and this is canceling a football game. It's not something that's horrible in their lives. But at that time, it was pretty devastating. So I said, "Guys, I've got something to tell you. Charlotte's not coming." Well, I'm a smart aleck a lot with the players, and I pick on them and cut up, and they said, "What do you mean, Coach? That isn't funny." I said, no, they're not coming. They said, "Coach, come on, man. What are you doing to us?" I said, "Guys, I'm really sorry. I'm not kidding this time, but they just called, and they're not coming because of COVID. So here's what we got to do. We got to turn this into an open date weekend, try to find somebody to play next weekend, and then get ready for Boston College." And poor Rick Steinbacher went through about 30 different universities trying to get someone to come in last Saturday, and it just didn't work out either for them or for us. It just wasn't the right mix. So here we are restarting the season against Boston College, and we've told the guys, let's just start again.
Yeah. Coach, football players and coaches in particular are such creatures of habit in the season. You know, Monday you do this, Tuesday you do this, so on and so on. How difficult has not just this disruption, but the uncertainty been as well here over the last few weeks?
It's been really a roller coaster more than anything else, Jones. And what we've tried to convince our players to do is control what you can control. Win the day. You take care of your health, mentally and physically. You take care of your academics, because that's harder remote when you're not in the classroom, and you've done that since middle of spring break, excuse me. And then when you're on the field, practice as hard as you can and get ready to play. And don't worry about all the things that you can't control that are out there. If you watch the news now, you're really afraid of all the awful things that are happening. And these are young people that aren't getting to experience what all of us did in college as normal college life. They have to wear a mask. They have to social distance. They have to wash their hands. The guys going to Boston College this weekend will be tested here. We'll get the test results when we get up there. If you get a positive up there, you have to get in a car and somebody has to drive you back 11 hours or something from Boston because you can't get on a plane with COVID. So a lot of new things in their life, and they have been incredible, Jones, in the way they've handled it. They've picked me up. We had great practices for Charlotte. We've had really good practices again last week And now we just have to actually restart the season since it's been 3 weeks since we've played.
Coach, I was going to ask you about the actual practices. You guys have practiced against each other a whole lot here over the last several weeks. So you feel good about the level that you're still seeing on the practice field?
I do. I watched a lot of games this weekend, and there was some ugly football, and especially in special teams. And I do think because we missed spring practice, because we didn't have our normal routines this summer, and there's some big comebacks. So I don't think guys are probably in as great a shape as they normally would have been. And special teams suffers because it's harder to do that against yourself live. And until you get in a ball game, you really can't experience all the different things that happen in that phase of it. So I do think it's different. It's more difficult, but it's that way for everybody. And what we've got to understand is we are so fortunate to be able to play. And I think all the players that are trying to do things right, I think the coaches, they've adjusted amazingly well to all the different things that come up when you say, okay, guys, you got to wear the mask here. You got to do this. Like we'll have to wear N95 mask on the bus and the plane going to Boston and coming back home.
Wow.
And they've been wearing their gaiters, but the medical experts are going to want us to wear something that is even stronger than the gaiters we've been wearing out at practice. And right now, Jones, it's been amazing. The players don't ask. They just say, I got you. They put their mask on and go back to work. So I've been so impressed by them. And weirdly enough, the players that are playing college football this year will probably come out stronger on the other side of this than any other group of football players ever. I remember 9/11, and it was awful. And we didn't know what was going to happen for the rest of our lives. We didn't know how it would change us. Well, it's changed some. This is even different because we started playing right after 9/11, and nothing was affected except travel at that time. So this will be something that I told the guys, get pictures of you with your mask and playing so you can share it with your children and your grandchildren, and hopefully it's something that they will never experience.
Yeah, certainly a moment in time we will all remember moving forward. Coach, one more thing before we get to our first break. You did get some good news during this stretch. First, you learned that parents of players would be allowed in Kenan Stadium the next time the Tar Heels play a home game, which is this next Saturday against Virginia Tech. And since then, there was the announcement that outdoor facilities could have 7% capacity in North Carolina. That would be around 3,500 fans or so in Kenan Stadium. So exciting information to know that there will be some Tar Heels with you in the stadium next time that you're in Kenan.
Well, absolutely. First, most importantly, the families of our players get to see their sons play, and their brothers and sisters play, and that's very important to us. So thank you, whoever made those decisions. And then secondly, we'll have some fans in, which will help and getting back toward the more normal. And I know Bubba and Rick are working on that right now to figure out what fans they are, because they've got a couple of weeks. At Boston this weekend, the families will not be able to come, and there will be no fans. So it'll be more like our first game here with Syracuse. But really excited that our families for sure can come, and our fan base can start working back towards seeing us play.
Again, that is October 10th, Carolina's next home game against Virginia Tech, but some big work to do before then, of course, with the trip to Boston College to see the Eagles this Saturday. We'll talk about that matchup and a lot more, plus we have an interview with Ravo Hassett coming up as well. It's the Mack Brown Show from Learfield, IMG College. Welcome back to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. It's the Mack Brown Show. He's the Hall of Fame head coach of Carolina football, Mack Brown. My name is Jones Angel. We appreciate you being with us, however you are joining us today. Reminder that we're brought to you by our friends at UNC Healthcare, and the team at UNC Health is dedicated to caring for champions of all kinds. That includes you and your family. See their lineup at the website, unchealthcare.org/sports. That's unchealthcare.org/sports. New polls out this week. AP poll, Carolina in at number 12. Reminder that now the other conferences are allowed to enter the poll even if they haven't played a game yet. So there has been some movement in that poll, but other ACC teams ranked. You have Clemson at number 1, Notre Dame in the league this year checking in at number 5, Miami at number 8, Pittsburgh at number 24. So that is 4 ACC teams in the top 12 of the AP poll. Coach, you mentioned watching some football this past weekend. When you watch when you're at home, do you scout or do you watch as a fan or a little bit of both?
I really watch as a coach. And I keep my notes, my notepad next to me, and I'm always looking at something that we might have missed or something we need to go back over. So onside kick, you're sitting there watching it, and the one team has a great kick and the other one has it go right through their hands. I'm going to go back and say, let's check personnel, make sure we've got our best hands out there for the hands team. And there was a game where a punt returner actually got a punt back in the end zone and was running out, and there was a block in the back, so that's a safety. Yep. So you lose the 2 points and you get the ball you have to kick off. So a lot of things like that I watch. And then when it's someone we're playing, I watch for personnel. I watch for attitude. I look at that. So I drive Sally crazy on Saturdays, Jones, because I'm just flipping. And she has trouble following. She says, okay, who's this now? Who's playing? And which is the one we're watching? And what color do they wear? And I said, hey, sweetie, come on, man. Let's figure this stuff out. But I watch from noon when I watch game day when we're off. Then I watch every snap of every game that I can possibly watch. I have about 5 of them going at once and have all the numbers of the channels. And I watch that till midnight. So that's something I really enjoy, but it helps me review all of the situations that could come up for us on Saturday as a head coach.
And there were some games this past weekend involving 2 teams that Carolina will play, Duke and Virginia, for example, NC State, Virginia Tech, Miami, Florida State, all games that involve both teams Carolina will see later in its schedule. Coach, there were some personnel pieces of news during this long break for the Tar Heels. I want to start in your secondary, and unfortunately, Miles Wolfhook, a veteran safety for you. Miles will no longer be with your football team due to academic reasons, and a shame, certainly a first-class young man and somebody I know who helped you a bunch on the field.
Yes, we will miss Miles. We'll miss his leadership. We'll miss his personality, his smile. He was a guy that the players really followed and enjoyed. And he is a graduate of the university, so he will be fine, but we're going to miss him. And we can't get him back out on the field. It is different. Graduate school's different. It is for some people. It's not for others. And unfortunately, he didn't do the things he needed to do in graduate school. And they're on a different timetable, so their finals were the latter part of September. And then you have another semester starting in October, and he just didn't get the job done. So we've moved Trey Morrison back to safety. We've moved Jaquarius Conley up to nickel. The time that we've had off will help those guys get more ready for this weekend because they haven't played as much in those positions. So that should help us moving forward.
Coach, I want to ask about both those guys. Coach, first, Trey Morrison, he's played just about every position in that secondary, I think, possible. He is clearly someone that you trust on the field because you've put a lot on his plate during his time at Carolina.
Yes, Trey's a tough player. He can really run. He'll hit you, but at the same time, he's very smart. And I laughed with him the other day and said, we'll hire you as a coach one day because you've played every position on defense in the secondary and nickel, and so you've been all over the place, and he's on all the special teams. So Trey's a really good player for us.
How about Jaquarius Conley, Coach, now the starting nickel back, a freshman out of Northside High School in Jacksonville, North Carolina, down on the coast. What do you like about that young player on your defense?
He is a freakish athlete. He's over 6 foot. He's 226 pounds. He can really run fast. He'll hit you. He's got very good instincts as a football player. Could play tailback for us as well as nickel or safety. He's on a lot of the special teams, so we think he will be a great player for us moving forward.
Coach, also a good piece of news health-wise. Joshua Izudu, one of your most versatile offensive linemen, unable to play in the game against Syracuse a couple of weeks ago due to injury. One would assume this long layoff would have helped him get closer to returning. How is Joshua doing?
He's doing really well, and it's early in the week, so you always say with continued progress we feel like he'll be ready to go on Saturday. But he's maybe our best offensive lineman, but definitely a guy that can play 4 of the 5 positions. So we definitely need him back. We've missed Easy a lot.
Carolina back on the field this Saturday against Boston College. That is a 3:30 kick up in Chestnut Hill. We're going to take a break, come back, start getting to some of your questions for the head coach of Carolina football. We'll preview that matchup with Boston College, have an interview with Ravo Hassett coming up as well. It's the Mack Brown Show from Learfield, IMG College. As Coach Brown mentioned earlier, the Tar Heels in the middle of their longest break in nearly 7 decades. It's going to be great to see the Heels back out on the field soon. It's a 3:30 kick against Boston College in Chestnut Hill. We'll preview that matchup with the Eagles coming up a little bit later in the show. But let's get to some of your questions for the head coach of the Heels. And due to COVID, of course, we are doing the show a little differently this season. Coach and I can't be with you 7 o'clock live on Monday night, so we encourage you to keep getting those questions in during the weekend before a Monday. We record early on Monday mornings, and you can send those in to asktheheels@gmail.com, that email address, or you can tweet a question right to me. It's at Jones Angel. Angel has 2 L's at the end. Don't forget, we gather those questions. We'll get to some of the best ones every Monday in talking to Coach. And Coach, we mentioned Joshua Izudu on the offensive line before the break and have a couple of questions around that offensive line. And let's start there. Had a question about a big offensive line commitment that the Tar Heels picked up late last week. Coach can't talk about individual commitments, but I wanted to ask you this, Coach. What do you look for when you're recruiting an offensive lineman? I would assume that's one of the more challenging positions at the high school level to try to project to the college level.
I think probably other than quarterback, it's the hardest because the growth potential is so different. You take a 325-pound youngster at 17 years old, what will he be at 22? Or you take a 275-pound young man as an offensive lineman, like a Brian Bollinger who was a tight end, or an Ethan Albright who was a tight end, and did those guys grow into 320-pound offensive tackles? And both of those guys played in the NFL. But it's a very, very difficult position because and they're also huge guys playing against smaller guys.
Yeah.
So they're playing against smaller guys than they will play against when they get to this level as well. So Stacy Searles has his hands full, and we have a very extensive evaluation process for all of our recruits. But we do feel like it's hardest to find tackles as well. Sometimes it's easier to play inside, even though center is a very difficult position, but guard's a little bit easier to play because you've got some help than tackle. When you become a tackle, you're out there by yourself against their best pass rushers. So it's very important that we do a great job of evaluating those offensive linemen. That's one of the areas we've got to upgrade in our depth for sure to get where we want to be with this program.
Coach, to that point, you had one of your tackles, Awesome Richards, played for the very first time, at least an extensive amount of snaps a couple of weeks ago against Syracuse. How'd you feel like Awesome performed in his first full game out there on the edge?
Awesome did really well. Playing left tackle may be the hardest position.
Yeah. And
Charlie Heck left us and went to the Texans, and he's doing a very good job there. But for us, we didn't know how Awesome was going to play, but he's really smart. He's about 6'5", 325. He moves his feet well. And the good thing for a guy like Awesome, unless he decides to go to the NFL early, this year doesn't count. So he really doesn't lose the fact that he didn't play as much last year. So after this year, he's still got 3 years ahead of him as an offensive lineman, and that's exciting for us.
That's a great point. By the way, that previous question that we asked about the offensive line recruiting was from Snow Skier via Twitter. This one, Coach, comes from Jeffrey, a much more traditional name, just an email question. It's actually about Joshua Izudu, who we mentioned earlier, and you referenced that Easy plays multiple spots on the offensive line. Jeffrey's question was, what allows him to be able to move between so many positions and still be successful?
Jeffrey, he's really smart. He's, I think he's academic all-conference, and he's bright. He studies football hard, but he has very few mistakes, and he can play all 4 positions. So that's such a luxury for us not only because we're thin in the offensive line, but at a time where you've got COVID. You never know whether during the COVID fall, as we will call it, who you're going to have available. So you could lose 2 offensive linemen on a Saturday morning and just have EZ move somewhere else. So, but he's really helping us in a lot of different ways.
One more question, Coach, that we had on the offensive line. This was an email question from Phil. Phil wanted to know about some of the young guys who may add depth. You mentioned earlier that depth was still a concern for you as you tried to build that depth on the offensive line. Are there a few young players that you have your eye on that you think may help you in the future?
Yes, that's not Phil Longo, is it?
I don't think so, but maybe he's just trying to get an inside. We'll find out.
Yes. No, Phil, again, another good question. Ty Murray is a young guy that we feel like will come along at center, and he's still not able to practice yet with an upper body injury. Jonathan Adorno is a guy that we feel like can be really good at some point. William Barnes, we're still hoping will come through. You've got Wisdom Asabura, who's only played 1 year of football, and he's 6'8", 315. So we keep saying, come on, Wisdom, because at some point now Wisdom may be a great player. And then you've got Caden Baker, who just came in as an offensive lineman and he played a little bit the other day against Syracuse as well at right tackle. Malik McGowan. You've got Wyatt Tanal. You've got a lot of young guys that are available, but it usually takes an offensive lineman a couple of years to play. And they usually just do not come in and start because the defensive linemen are quicker and stronger. And we still have a very young offensive line with our starters. So that's an area where these other guys, I probably missed somebody because I don't have a depth chart in front of me, but it's a place where some of these other guys need to come off.
It's hard to coach 6'8", 315, right, Coach? That's the part that's hard for you guys to fix.
Well, I asked him the other day, speaking of Wisdom Asabura, I said, what's the hardest thing for you? And he said, I've never played. I don't understand. When Coach Searles tells me something, we have to show him everything because he doesn't have any background.
Yeah.
But he is big, he can run, he's really athletic, he's smart, and he's trying. So we're going to be patient with him and feel like that one day that light's going to come on, and when it does, we're going to have a really good player.
Coach, let's sneak in one more question before we go to break. This is from Allie. Allie wanted to know if there is still a possibility of adding a non-conference game this season with the Tar Heels losing the Charlotte game. I know Rick Steinbacher, Bubba Cunningham, and some others are dealing with that more on a day-to-day basis than you are, but do you have any insight on the possibility of adding another non-conference game?
Yes, Allie, it has to be a home game, and the league does want us to play a game. So it wasn't an option, I think, for the TV schedule. We were told we needed to play an extra game. So we have scheduled Western Carolina. I announced it this morning. We will play it on Friday, the week after the Miami game, the week before the conference championship game. It'll be on Friday night. And there's also a clause in there that if for some reason we have to reschedule a postponed conference game, then we would not play that game. But right now we're planning on playing Western Carolina on the Friday after Miami.
So, big news there, Carolina and Western Carolina with the schedule. And, Coach, it's unusual to have the clause in there that says, hey, guys, we'd like to play this game. We want to play you, but understand we might have to change. But that's just kind of the times we're in, I guess.
Well, it is, and good for Western Carolina that they wanted to work it out. I feel like that our administration wanted to play an in-state team again to keep the money in our system like we did with and in our state like we were doing with Charlotte.
Yeah.
And when we lost the Charlotte game, this is kind of the same thing in the mindset of just keep your money in state right now because all of our schools are struggling financially for next year with their budgets.
Coach, after this break, we're going to have some audio from Ray Vohasek, young defensive lineman on your team. Adam Lucas and I had the chance to talk to Ray on the Carolina Insider podcast, had a lot of fun chatting with him. And young man who played very well against Syracuse and somebody I know you expect a lot from this season on the defensive line.
We do. You've got to give Ray so much credit. He comes out of junior college. Coach Fedora was recruiting him before we got here. We're not really into junior college that much. We didn't know much about him. He had 3 years to play. He's over 300 pounds. He's really quick. He's tough. When he first got here, he wasn't in very good shape. I said the first time I ever met him, when he came back after his official visit, I said, Ray, how are you doing? He said, oh man, it's hot here. I don't know if I can handle this or not. And now he's become one of the better defensive linemen around. So he's fun to watch. He's a mess for our guys in practice to try to deal with because he's so quick and he's so powerful, and he loves to play. Yeah. So he's a player the more our fans get to know, the more they're going to really like.
I think you will enjoy this interview with Ray. That's coming up after this break. After that, we'll go to another commercial break. Then we'll be back with the head coach of the Tar Heels, Mack Brown. It's his show. It is Mack Brown Show from Learfield, IMG College. Back on the Mack Brown Show. Thanks so much for being with us. My name is Jones Angel. He is the head coach of the Tar Heels, Mack Brown. His team heading to Chestnut Hill. First road game of the season, just the second game of the season for the Tar Heels as they face the 2-0 BC Eagles Saturday at 3:30. We'll preview that matchup in our next segment. We're going to get to some more questions from you, though, here in this one. Before we do that, I need to ask you if you know any Tar Heels that work selflessly to improve the lives of others and their communities. If you do, LS Tractor would like to hear about it. LS Tractor and the Tar Heels have partnered up to recognize hometown heroes from throughout the state of North Carolina. Visit goheels.com/hero and nominate someone you know for a chance to be recognized later this season. LS Tractor, proud partner of Carolina Athletics. And speaking of heroes, Coach, I think that moves nicely into a question we received from Grant. Grant wanted to know, who were some of the people who motivated you, some mentors, some heroes for you when you were younger that really got you into the coaching profession?
Grant, it would start with my grandfather. My grandfather was the winningest head football coach in Middle Tennessee history. He actually, as a superintendent, integrated our school system. And he was the love of my life and a joy. And he's the one that I said, Granddad, if you could give me some advice for the rest of my life, what would it be? And he said it would be always do the right thing. And you'll sleep good at night and it'll work out long term for you. And he said, and if you're not sure if it's right or not, you probably shouldn't do it because you're having to think about it. And he always wanted to be fair. He always wanted to be consistent with people and do the right thing. And those are the principles that we build our program on today. And then you've got guys like Joe Paterno and Bobby Bowden and Lou Holtz, who were so good to me as a young coach, and Paul Dietzel, actually the head coach at LSU that won a national championship in '59. He was the color guy on our radio broadcast at Appalachian State. So I got to ride the bus with him to every game for a year, and I worked at LSU when he was the athletics director. And Jones, we paid him $25 a game, so he was overpaid probably, but he hung in there, and I learned so much on those bus trips from him. And then I have to say, Coach Darrell Royal, because he was like an older brother to me when we went to Texas. He's one of the main reasons that I went to Texas, and I had him for a long time at every practice and every day, and there's a lot of knowledge just oozing out that have helped me. But one of the things that I'm trying to do at this stage in my life is help younger coaches, Grant, because the older guys help me so much. And I would like to be able to repay that to young football coaches when they've got questions for me.
Those radio rates haven't changed much since back then up to right now. Coach Dennis sent this one in. Mentioned the Military Bowl and the Philly special type of trick play that you ran down on the goal line for a score. Sam Howell had a receiving touchdown, part of his MVP performance in that game. Dennis's question is, when do you know the time is right for one of those kind of high risk, high reward type of trick plays to work in the course of a game?
Well, Dennis, number one, I like that play because Kevin Nagandi was my TV partner on ABC's Countdown to Kickoff every Saturday. He's a Temple graduate. He helped hire their staff, so I actually told him it was the Nagandi special. just for him to kind of stick him since it was Temple. But very honestly, trick plays do not work unless you're moving the ball. Because if you're not blocking people, then you can't fool anybody.
Yeah.
And I've called some trick plays when I was the offensive coordinator, and since we've been a head coach, we've called them, and nobody ever saw them because they never got back to the line of scrimmage. Somebody said, "Man, why didn't you have a trick play?" I said, "We did. We called 2 of them. You just didn't ever notice them because they didn't make it back." So the problem is when things are going well, and we were running the ball so well in the Temple game at that point in the game, they were over pursuing, so that made it really easy for the misdirection pass for the touchdown. But trick plays work when everything else is working. Or early in a ball game where people are over pursuing and you can take a deep shot. But it's not something that you can just pull out and say, "Hey, we can't make a first down. Let's do a trick play. That'll help us," because it usually doesn't get to a point where you recognize it.
Time for that double reverse pass here on 3rd and 15.
Yeah, minus 16 on the sack again. So, in fact, I actually came home after one game. We stunk at Texas, and Sally said, "You know, people in the stands were saying, why don't you use a trick play?" I said, "We tried 3 of them. They didn't work. We didn't block anybody, so give it up."
Coach, let's do one more here before we take our final break. This comes from Lucas. Lucas says, "It is often said the most improvement comes between week 1 and week 2 during the course of the season." And Lucas has a double question. One, do you believe that? And then secondly, do you think that still applies to your team despite the fact that you have had such a large break between what will be week 1 and week 2?
Well, Lucas, it's a great question. I was actually thinking about this morning because I do not think it relates to us right now. Normally, it is true that you improve the most between the first and the second week, and it's because you haven't done as much live contact. You haven't done your special teams live. You haven't played against somebody else. You get so you know each other's offense and defensive plays during practice. So yes, you make a lot of mistakes. Coaches coach those mistakes. They correct them. Players have a different mentality of confidence in what they're doing the second week. So normally, yes. Now, I think we're actually starting over. I think that's a great advantage for Boston College. They played great against Duke. They didn't play as well last week against Texas State, probably looking toward our game. And so here we are. They're going to be motivated this week. They're going into their 3rd game. We've had 3 weeks off, so I think that's definitely an advantage for them in a lot of ways.
Good question, Lucas. That's going to be our Cruisers question of the night, brought to you by Cruisers, your fast and friendly local convenience store. Cruisers, let's go. We need to go to our final break, come back, and we'll take a closer look at the next opponent for the Tar Heels, the 2-0 Boston College Eagles, when we return to wrap up the Mack Brown Show from Learfield, IMG College. Carolina will face Boston College in Chestnut Hill. It'll be the first meeting in Chestnut Hill between these two since 2009. It is Saturday at 3:30. Coach, you referenced this last segment. BC 2-0. Had a come-from-behind win, scored 10 points in the final minutes to beat Texas State 24-21 this past weekend. The first matchup for the Eagles, a 26-6 victory in Durham over Duke 2 Saturdays ago. So certainly a team that has to feel good, has some positive momentum, and will be excited to see the Tar Heels coming into their home stadium.
Yes, I think it's probably the best thing that could have possibly happened to them and the worst thing for us. Yeah. If they had blown Texas State out, everybody would have said, "Oh boy, this is going to be a tough game." Now people, and hopefully not our players, are saying, "Oh boy, they didn't play well, man." And then Boston College coaches helped them win the game. They came back to win a close game from behind. They're down 14 in the 4th quarter. And now they have a lot of confidence, especially in Coach Jeff Hafley, their new coach, who, by the way, played for Jay Bateman when he was the head coach at Siena at 26 years old. So wow. They are very dear friends as we get ready to prepare for this game. But they'll be motivated. Great compliment to both programs that Joe Tessitore and Greg McElroy are doing the game on ABC National at 3:30. So everybody thinks it's going to be a good game, so it'll be fun.
Coach Hafley, a defensive-minded coach, been in the NFL, and then the co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State last season. And Coach, you can see some of those that defensive mindset already. 6 turnovers forced in the first 2 games by Boston College. Yeah,
Jeff was his mentor was Greg Schiano, and Greg's one of the better defensive coaches in college football. So when you start looking at, he'll have them lined up right. Jay Bateman's talked about he's very intense, so they'll be ready to play. They'll play hard. They're big, they're strong. 4 of their 5 offensive linemen are back, and they all had awards in the ACC last year of some kind. They've got one of the best tight ends in the country. Transfer in from Notre Dame at quarterback. That's 6'5", 230. Yep. Big 240-pound running back in Bailey, and Levy's a guy that can really, he got speed in space, and they throw it to him a lot on third downs, and got a couple of really good receivers. Defensively, it's what you figure. They're tough. They're just going to line up and get after you, and we talked about the sacks. They force turnovers. So this will be a great test for us, and a great way for us to restart our season.
Carolina and Boston College coming up at 3:30. First road game of the season for the Tar Heels, having to handle all the travel as well in these unique times. Coach, thank you so much for your time as always this week. Look forward to being with you again next week and hopefully get into a rhythm here and start playing some football here for the Tar Heels.
Thanks, Jones. It's really exciting for us to think we actually are going to play this weekend, so that's fun.
This has been another edition of the Mack Brown Show from Learfield. I am G. Collins.